Okay. I'm just gonna get one more drink of water. This is not beer, by the way.
I don't really care if it is.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours.
Hello,
Commissioner
how's it
Wilson,
going?
how are you today?
I'm doing great for this rainy Thursday. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. My name's Lee Perry. For all the new people that started following us recently, thank you so much. We appreciate
Welcome.
you. And super excited to catch up with you and talk a little bit about updates from the past 2 weeks since we did not do a virtual office hour last week.
I know I missed you. I missed all of our people out there, but it doesn't mean that the fun here we in Orange County stopped. There was a lot that went on over the last 2 weeks. So I'm glad that we're going to dig in on some of it today. And some of it may have to carry over till the next one, or we can maybe hit up, some extra updates. But yeah, it's been busy.
Yeah, well, let's start off with the most dreaded subject that we can't wait for it to go away, COVID updates.
I think for the duration of my tenure so far, every time we come back, I feel like I'm giving bad news and then worse news and then bad news. And don't get me wrong, there is still some bad news. We did get some bad news this week at the county and had a loss in our county staff family. And we are, grieving with those families out there that have struggled in the worst ways during COVID. But for the first time in a really long time, Lee, it looks like our numbers are coming down and staying down on that positivity to the point where we're no longer in a state of emergency. And so we're really hopeful going into the holidays that we can stay safe enough to be together and to round the corner and be done. I think getting the approval for the younger set of our residents is going to give everybody an extra sense of relief, and hopefully the parents out there that I know are really, really nervous about their kids developing COVID symptoms and getting sick. Hopefully those vaccinations will be coming, and we can all say, look, at that point, everyone's had the opportunity to get safe and stay in a sort of in that chain of vaccinations that has been so successful to date. I know we seem to get a lot of questions still about the vaccination schedules, and my advice is go talk to your doctor. Make sure that person is a qualified professional. We've had several, retired chiropractors or, a PhD in philosophy show up and yell at us as a board and call themselves doctors, but talk to your doctor, talk to somebody who's really an expert in viruses and infections, and find out what the best course is for your family.
Yes, and we get a lot of updates directly before and after every press briefing that the mayor does. The next one will be on Monday. Just so you all know, at this point, we're at a 3.51% 14-day rolling positivity rate.
We haven't been that low. We haven't been that low since when?
Oh my God, March, May. June was when it started getting kind of bad again. But I remember around that time.
Pre-Delta variant for sure. So that's really great news.
Yeah, that's really great news. So we're going to go ahead and drop more of those testing sites and everything in the chat. And then also, if you have any questions, please email district1@ocfl.net. And
I want to thank everybody out there for staying the course. I know that it's such a strange time because my entire life there's been viral illnesses, but I've never seen one that created such division, and it makes me sad. But seeing right now the numbers of people, the percentages in Orange County and really across the nation who have done the right thing and tried to keep their communities safe, it gives me hope. And I feel like we're seeing the numbers now that reflect what we knew. If we got to over a certain percent of vaccinations, that we would be able to sustain that low positivity rate. So, I think those measures are working.
Yeah. And if you have any questions about emergency rental assistance, also please email district1@ocfl.net, and we can connect you to the incredible team here that is helping to distribute resources.
Exactly. There's still money we basically have federal funds that were allocated specifically for people who got behind in rent as a result of COVID impacts. And so I think there was some misinformation about whether or not you needed to be unemployed or, other qualifying factors. And really the requirements are, very specific, but ultimately it's for people who fell behind in rent, so have back rent and can show that it was because of COVID in some way.
Yeah. And I just want to say, totally off the cuff, like if you know a teacher or a school board member right now, please give them a hug.
Yes.
I'm listening to NPR about what's going on at the state. I'm just so disheartened right now because it just feels like they're getting hit from both sides. And I just want to give them all a hug.
It's horrible. And, Lee, I think the school board members that we have here that are, on school boards across the state, they're not paid a full-time salary. They are typically either retired teachers, they're people that were involved in education as a career, and they are literally being threatened with removal and replacement for listening to the advice of a medical panel. So here in Orange County, we have a medical panel that advises our school board, and the school board listened to the medical panel. And these were, our Orlando Health and Advent Health are big providers. Infectious disease doctors, pediatricians, this is where they're getting their information. And, to think about having our so-called small government governor threaten to remove them, it's a surreal world right now.
Yeah. Well, we had a really fun week. Before we dive into what we were up to yesterday and today specifically, I wanted to also bring up your incredible photos from Paws, Cause for Paws event on Sunday.
It's our cause for Paws,
Our Cause
and we
for
can definitely
Paws.
share a
Cutest
link
name.
of. So they are a fabulous rescue, one of many rescues here in the Central Florida area. And, rescues right now, what they do a lot of times is they really act as a conduit between animals that need homes and foster families and then adoptive families. And they do the underlying administration of getting the animals veterinary services set up, and they try to make sure they're vetting good homes for foster and vetting good homes for placement. And so it's a tremendous amount of volunteer hours and time and love that go into that. And on top of it all, they have to be able to raise some money to function as a rescue. So one of the really great things that this particular rescue does is a pet costume contest for Halloween. And I had the extraordinary honor of being a judge on the panel. It was so much fun. I loved all of the families and pet lovers that came out. There were, I think it was 20 some odd contestants, including a pony, because it was a pet costume contest. It was a pet pony. It was actually a therapy pony. Adorable.
Are you sure it wasn't a dog dressed as a pony?
It was a pony dressed as a pumpkin. And it was such a sweet thing, because I learned so much that, that this particular pony, that the farm that the owner works on, that they actually use it for therapy in children's services. And so I got to learn a little something about their services, and just seeing the creativity and the engagement by the community. I ran into many of our rescue partner friends that I had not seen since the Ocoee community, or the Ocoee Commission meeting, and coming off of that. And it was so heartbreaking for this community of animal lovers. Being somewhere to see the support and the celebration really felt like exactly what the doctor ordered. So it was a really wonderful, fun day. You combine pets, Halloween, and we're at Crooked Can Brewery. It was
Perfect day. Yeah, and I'll just say, with the Ocoee Retail ordinance conversation, you touched on it. 2 different virtual office hours leading up to the vote, and since then, our Orange County Animal Services social media has been begging for support, because they're running out of space for the amount of dogs that they have.
Lee, there are so many layers to my frustration with the way that the outcome of the Ocoee vote. And I understand that Ocoee is a municipality and operates under its own municipal charter. But the reality of it is, we are the only Orange County is the only entity that has an animal shelter. So Orange County Animal Services provides all of the animal services for all the municipalities. Ocoee does not have any ability to enforce anything if there would be animal abuse allegations, if there was some kind of a health scare because of a infectious disease brought into this pet store. That would be our health services department. So there's layers to the frustration in the way that this ordinance was written, and the way it's intended to protect one business. But something I want everybody who's watching this to know is that taxpayers in Orange County, from end to end, will be paying for this. So even though Ocoee wrote the ordinance to protect one business that imports from puppy mills, and I have all the data that actually some really amazing professionals put together for us so that we could present some actual data to the Ocoee Commission that shows where they're purchasing these puppies and the infractions that these particular mass breeders have been held to. And I mean the worst types of infractions, things like animals left out in freezing, infections in eyes, ears, parvo. And this was found at the mass breeders. And then we can see the mass breeders' name, license, and address on the order forms for the pet store here in Ocoee. So there's no disputing, because it's all done, it's recorded as they import, because it's an import. And so the thing that absolutely seems to be a disconnect for the Ocoee Commission, and at least the ones that voted yes for this ordinance, because I will say there were 2 commissioners that were very brave in voting no, but the ones that voted yes, there was this disconnect in that they said, well, one of them said caveat emptor. And what that means is buyer beware. So we're just going to put this right back on the residents. The residents should beware. If you go in and you buy something at this pet store and it's from a puppy mill and it's sick and it's dying and it has an infection, that's your fault. That's basically what their position was. And to me, it is such an absolute dereliction of duty, understanding that our job as a commissioner, as a government entity, is to really protect the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. It's literally our constitutional mandate. And so when you think about the health and safety of our residents, defrauding them on what they're purchasing and introducing potentially communicable diseases and making them go into what ends up being years and years of debt and suffering because of an animal that's sick, or then burdening the Orange County Animal Services system with an animal that has been returned and doesn't have a home anymore because it's not a pair of genes. If it gets returned for having genetic issues, what do you think happens to that animal?
Yeah, and there's even more layers that just getting into this job, which I feel like everyone should tour the Orange County Animal Services shelter.
Exactly.
They also take care of the really hard legal battles when people are hoarding animals. Just this past week, they confiscated over 64 animals in just 1 week, and they have over 180 dogs only.
That's right.
That is far past capacity, and that's our tax dollars everywhere throughout the county that are paying for the legal work and all of the out in the community work to take care of these dogs.
Exactly. And it's, Orange County Animal Services, unlike a private nonprofit shelter or rescue, they have the ability to decide sort of what's, part of the rescue process that they want to focus on. Orange County Animal Services is in on every step of it. So if a dog is a stray and has been hit by a car, that's where they go. If a dog has been confiscated in a case of neglect or abuse, that's where they go. And because animals under the law in the United States are still considered property, even if the animal services officers confiscate animals that have been abused, and it's obvious they've been abused, there's still due process because they're property. And that due process takes time. And so in the meantime, taxpayers here in Orange County are responsible for taking care of the legal costs for the county to undergo the investigation and to go through the whole process of trying to make sure that those animals are kept away from a potentially abusive environment. Well, this will be the same for this one pet store that a separate municipal entity decided to give a pass to. If there's reports of neglect or abuse, Orange County Animal Services officers will be the ones to report there. And, the ordinance came with this false sort of layer of, additional protection with that they have to post the phone number of the Ocoee Commission for if there's a complaint. And the other part was that they have to post where they purchased the animals from. Well, they already did that. They tell you on their website where they purchased the animals from. They give you the actual breeder's name and a picture of some building. I don't know where it is, but it's a building. But if you take that name and then you plug it back into the USDA's inspection list and the mass breeders who have been cited again and again and again, it's one of them. So, asking them to post the same breeder that we know for a fact has had terrible, infractions in violated animal welfare for a very long time. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. It's just, it's sadly enabled a business practice that hurts animals, hurts people. I had a woman sitting next to me during the meeting who, to me, was the most compelling of the public speakers that night in Ocoee. She was a mom of a couple younger children. They fell in love with a puppy at the store. They brought it, they paid, $4,000, something crazy, brought it home and immediately started having medical issues. And the reality of the situation is that they love this animal, and this animal is going to have a lifetime of medical issues because it was mass bred. It has some genetic issues, and it has some other, it had some more short-term things that had to be treated for. And the store completely refused all responsibility, and it falls on that family. And the family isn't going to leave that animal at animal services, but they could. We don't turn away any animals. And so we are then paying for the care of this sick animal that was imported, sold, bought low, sold high by the importer from puppy mills. And we're just going to continue to ask residents to keep their eyes on it and do as much education as we can, because my feeling about it is, at this point, if caveat emptor is what the Ocoee Commission wants people to do, right? Buyer beware, consumer beware. Then my job as the commissioner for the district and someone who lives a few miles from this puppy store is to try to inform those consumers. I don't think it's the right position to have a caveat emptor and tell you buyer beware. I think that we have a responsibility to share what we know and to keep our public safe.
Perfect. So the call to action, I think, for a lot of the viewers watching right now, number one, please visit our May 7th virtual office hours, where we invited a couple rescues and Diane from the shelter to come and speak on what it's like to be a foster, what it's like to have, all the services that we have here and that we're lucky to have here at the county. And ultimately, if you can become a foster or an adopter, please reach out to a local rescue or the shelter, or email district1@ocfl.net and let us know if you have any questions or fears, so that we can help alleviate some of the burden of all of these animals right now.
Lee, I have to vent this, and then I'll get off my my soapbox on this issue. It's a very emotional issue for those of us, and I know that so many of you all that reach out to us and that I know out in the community care very deeply about this. So I know I'm preaching to the choir. It was so insulting to hear one of the commissioners say that not everybody wants a rescue dog because they're damaged. And all I could think was, they're damaged because of people. They didn't come into the world and damaged. They were either bred in an unethical way, which created some medical problems, or they were treated poorly. And both those things are the fault of humans. And you could hear the audible gasp on the side of the room where the animal lovers were. Like, did he just say that? Not everybody wants it. I understand not everybody wants a rescue. That's not the argument. The argument is that if you are going to, be specific in the breed choice that you want, that you find a reputable breeder. And we had reputable breeders really chime in during this process. And they said, you should know your animal's mother and father if you're going through that breeding process. That sometimes people don't want to adopt because they don't know what the origins of the animal were. And that's not the same as being damaged. That just means that there's less known. But if you're going to a reputable breeder, you should have been able to meet, because most reputable breeders love the animals that they breed, and the specific breeds, they're very protective of their genetics and of their health. So, that's not the intent of the type of ordinance that Orange County enacted. It certainly was. The entire conversation was lost on at least 3 of the Ocoee Commission members. 2 of them I felt like did a really great job. I want to thank Commissioner Firstner and Commissioner Oliver for doing their homework. It seemed very obvious to me that they inspected the language of the ordinance and realized that there were contradictions, and that Ocoee was limited in its ability to enforce it. And so that's why they voted no. And I appreciate their diligence in that effort, and I look forward to working with them in the future.
Oh, great. Damage. That sounds like someone who doesn't want to shop at a thrift store for their clothes because they're dirty.
Not everybody wants a used car because they're damaged.
What? Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being a voice for the animals, Commissioner. Let's talk a little bit about our field trip today and yesterday. Just a little context. So yesterday we were invited by the West Orange Chamber of Commerce to go on a tour of Lake Apopka and Oakland Nature Preserve. Today we were invited by Visit Orlando, inspired by comments that Commissioner Wilson made at the Board of County Commission meeting about ecotourism and how we should really be putting our money and effort in highlighting some of the rare gems that are very specific to Florida in our ecotourism. And so we had an opportunity to tour a couple of places. So let's start with yesterday.
I was gonna say it was definitely full days, but it was neat that they backed up to each other, because I really believe that the subject matter overlapped, and that the conversations that we had on day one with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and with the Friends of Lake Apopka, and with our friends over at the Oakland Nature Preserve, that all those conversations were able to come back in today when we discussed ecotourism with Visit Orlando. And I want to frame this by saying that coming into this office in the middle of a pandemic, and really already being such a outdoors person who loves being out in nature, understands the value that we have in our forests and in our rivers and our lakes, I think during the pandemic that even the people who didn't typically really enjoy those places were awakened to them. And so what a great opportunity for us to then, re-examine, reinvest, reinvigorate the things that we already have invested in here in West Orange County, which, one of those things obviously is Lake Apopka. It has a fascinating history, was considered a vacation place for middle and upper class Americans during pre-World War II times, all the way up until 30 years ago. And then there was some decisions that were made at that time based on the science at the time, agricultural practices that were different, and the way that we treated sewer that was definitely different. And Lake Apopka became a very sick lake. And then a group of citizens got together and decided that it was time to try to figure out how to make Lake Apopka healthy again. $100 million later, I'm gonna say it again. And I don't know how many bazillion volunteer hours and work hours and different departments and different jurisdictional entities. I'm here to tell you that being out there yesterday was such a beautiful, beautiful experience because of all the wildlife that was out there. And if you haven't visited the Lake Apopka Wildlife Drive, it is something really, it's a wonderful experience. I know that as it gets cooler, we have more migrating birds that will come in. So for my bird watchers, this is the place to go. It is really an amazing thing also to hear what the Southwest Florida Management, no wait, is it Southwest? Which one? I'm like messing up my water.
St. John's Water
Oh my
Management
gosh,
District.
I did it again.
No, but there is a Southwest Water Management District too.
I know, but I do that all the time because I know that if I go far enough south, I've got the.
Yeah.
So St. John's, the scientists that do the studies on the hydrology in the ecosystem there, and the water quality and the water quantity, and the way that they've really had to take different cuts at this to try to get some improvement. And it's a long game. There's no doubt about it. Prevention would have been the way to go. And now we know. And that's why we work so hard, right? Like Lee and Hannah and I work so hard to try to do this in other places where we try to take the lessons learned and make sure that we're not doing the same thing that happened there. But to see the scientists and hear them talk about what they're doing, it was actually probably one of the most illuminating things I've done in my adult life.
So I highly recommend you all, go and look at, go and take a tour of the West Orange Trail leading up to Lake Apopka. It really is a perfect example of how property values can be influenced by a beautiful amenity like a trail. And I think that's something that has been a fight for a long time in different communities of people who don't want bikers and things like that around them because they're scared it might drive crime or what have you. Because the West Orange Trail has basically proven that you can obviously invest in nature and invest in your community, it also helps bring a sense of pride to an area. And now they're expanding on it and doing studies to increase safety and ridership and all these amazing things.
And connectivity, right? The idea that you can hop on your bike if you live in Oakland and go out to dinner in downtown Winter Garden, and have your whole family with you. You're getting your exercise, you're outside, you're not paying a penny for gas. it's so many layers to the advantages, and it really did drive the housing market in that area into a level that, really, um, it wouldn't have been if it didn't
Mhm.
have that connectivity of that amenity. And it's a trail. It wasn't it was an investment, but it wasn't something, you're not talking about some space age investment. This was something that we
Mhm.
started on trails. And
Yeah.
here we are all these years later coming back to them.
Yeah, and to really double highlight the point that you made about these incredible scientists who are going so far beyond anything that I ever heard anywhere else, in terms of like water quality assessments and then actually designing different methods of extracting the phosphorus. It was really inspirational to me because I feel like you hear so many stories of how 90% of our water bodies are contaminated and all these things. It's like, is anybody really paying attention to water quality? And then you find out that there are techniques and there's technology that it has a cure for a lot of these problems that we just need to catch up with the
And
technology and fund it.
Lee, to me also, so this was the other one that just absolutely blew my mind, was that what they're extracting in order to get the phosphorus levels down in the water is phosphorus, but it's its own product that can be commodified.
Yeah.
So what was amazing to me after having wrestled on the side of conservation and protection and really been up against chambers of commerce primarily, who say things like, well, that's going to kill commerce. And then sitting with the Chamber of Commerce and listening to a scientist who said, no, actually, this is its very own economic driver, that they utilize this phosphorus they have several different avenues that they, once it's extracted, that they use it in products or in other ways as their own endpoint for that phosphorus. And I mean,
Yeah.
to see that full circle, because of course, I mean, it didn't even dawn on me that it has to go somewhere, and that obviously part of it needs to be, our soil has a certain natural level, and you've got to make sure that that doesn't change. But hearing that the surplus of it has uses above and beyond was, I thought such an incredible argument to continue to fight for those types of projects all over.
Yeah. Oakland Nature Preserve never disappoints.
Yes.
They have so many cool improvements happening to their main education center that, a lot of the community helped fundraise for, and they've been receiving awesome grants. Please check it out. They're doing so much restoration on site too.
I got to give a shout out to all of the scouting troops out there. There were Gold Award projects, there were Eagle Scout projects, there are Silver Award projects. So that's our young people who grew up going to their summer programs there or walking out on the boardwalk at Oakland Nature Preserve, and then turning around and investing their time to do some big project to bring some ongoing value and to really leave a lasting mark. And it just makes me feel really proud of the young people in this area. And I know that's a lot of hard work, but just know we're all seeing it every day. It's lasting work.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then, during the budget hearings, Visit Orlando was, obviously there talking about some of the budget goals that they had for this upcoming year. And you brought up ecotourism and how important it is. And then that inspired them to connect with our office to organize another field trip.
So in Visit Orlando, for people who aren't familiar, it is something that falls. So the state has something called Visit Florida, and it's really a part of the Department of Economic Opportunity. And so there are statutory really investments that are made in order to drive tourism and to try to get some return on investment in tourism related industries. And so Orlando has a similar thing, and it's been largely, of course, focused on what we think of as traditional tourism in this area, which is our beautiful, theme parks and our restaurants that are in the tourist corridors. But for those of us who've lived here for our whole lives or for any period of time, there's so much more. And my feeling about it, once again, coming out of the pandemic and being in that area, we're like, hey, if we can get outside, we can all be together because we just need to spread out. And fresh air is good. That there's an opportunity for us to be able to include our ecotourism or the ecology and our investments in ecology and part of that promotion. I think that it's a little bit intimidating for someone like me who really loves conservation for conservation's sake. I think there are areas that should be off limits to people because we just need them for their value or their ecological value. But I also think the way that we continue to encourage investment in ecology and in environmentally sensitive places is that, is explaining to people why they're important and showing them the beauty and showing them that, this is why we live. We get the oxygen from this and our water from this, and showing them it's fun. Kayaking's fun, hiking is fun, bird watching is incredible. So having them come with us today was such a great, we could have gone on for days because I do think that Orange County and West Orange County, I think there's so many things to see and do. And I loved, they spent time with us this morning at the Tibet Butler Preserve. If you have not been to the Tibet Butler Preserve, it's beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful place. Go and then post about it, share it, let everyone else know, because it's a place that we as taxpayers invested in, and we want the community to get a benefit from it. And we also want that to be protected forever and ever. And I'm always fearful that if it's too hidden, if it's a gym that's too hidden, that someone's going to sneak in and steal it. So, we want to highlight those places.
430 acres of natural lands that are preserved. So you can't bring your dog, but it was one of the most beautiful trails I've ever seen, honestly.
And at different times of the year, it looks so differently. And so I would even say, if you've gone once in the summer, go again in the winter, because the way that they actually manage it, obviously they have what would have occurred naturally at some point, which was the brush fires to kind of keep down some of the underbrush. And so the cycle of life that comes from those is so incredible to see throughout the year, that you can go back 3 times in 6 months and it looks so different. So it's really special. We got to see a little bunny. We saw, I felt like we staged it for the visitor land of people, because we walked out of the building, we're coming down and around the corner, and here comes a bunny hopping across, and the bunny kind of stopped, gave us a couple, blinks. It was great.
It was awesome. And then after that, we went and toured Nehrling Gardens in Gotha.
Another place. If you are listening to this and you haven't been, please check it out. We have this amazing little piece of history and Florida history, not just Central Florida history. Nehrling Gardens was the home to somebody who's really considered the grandfather of the botany movement in Florida, and all of the interesting Florida flora and fauna that we've just become very accustomed to. We take for granted the things that really decorate so much of Florida. And Nehrling Gardens was sort of the place where those came from. And Teddy Roosevelt visited there at some point. Gerald Ford visited there at some point. There's been textbooks written about the development of some of the plant species and the seeds that were from there. So we have that here, and it's being protected. Sadly, it went through a phase of neglect when there wasn't yet historic protections. But as these things go, fortunately, there was a group of people that felt really passionately about protecting it, and they started raising money and trying to figure out how to get grants. And here we are. It is now safely tucked away. What I want to say about that is that I don't take that for granted either. And I know that they are under great pressure in Gotha, development pressure from the Department of Transportation with the expansion of the turnpike. And so it's going to take all of us still really fighting for that little piece of paradise right there, and the history and the culture. And that's worth preserving. Gotha as a rural settlement has its own history. It has its place that, needs to be protected. So that's going to take all of us, because the Department of Transportation won't just listen to me, but they will listen to a big group. And so we're going to be probably rounding back and getting some things on the calendar to make sure that we have a unified voice in preventing the expansion from affecting Gotha right there.
Awesome. All righty. And we'll definitely drop some chat. We have so many photos. I have to do so much social media after this. So you guys will get it to have the whole scoop of every place that we went and toured, so you can go and visit too. Now, there were some really important things that have come up on the last two BCC meetings, and some things coming down the line, including a fertilizer kind of overview of the ordinance, and then we did some stakeholder meetings. Do you want to talk a little bit about what those stakeholder meetings were for?
Yeah, so this is something that, if you are new to following our office, then it may be a first time. Anybody that's been here for any period of time knows the priorities when we came into office. We're really trying to protect our natural resources and trying to protect our forests. So this week we finally kind of saw the culmination of some of those efforts in the first of what's going to be a series of tree ordinance updates, public work sessions. I shouldn't say public work sessions. They're public in that they are coming to the BCC, and anybody can come. And thank you, Maria. Thank you. I'm trying to think of who else came. We had some people. The Nature
Eric
Conservancy
Rollins
came. Yes, thank you for coming and giving a public comment about the importance of the tree ordinance and tree protections. You don't have to drive far in Orange County to see that the protections that are on the books right now don't work. Mass grading and mass scrubbing is a huge problem out here in West Orange County for any development plan that goes through. It's this foregone conclusion that they'll be able just to scrub the land clean and go from there because it's less expensive for them to do that. And without having a proper tree inventory and knowing what's already on the property, making any other decisions about zoning, about subdivision plans, they're hard to do. And my point, since I got into office, the very first BCC that I sat through, I said we need to have all that information before the very first part of this, because even if you're looking at the rezoning, which you hear from people, the applicants, well, we don't have to worry about that yet. We can worry about that part of it. We can worry about what's on the property when we get to the PSP, the subdivision plan. We don't have to worry about it for rezoning. Well, no, that doesn't make sense, right? Because if you're rezoning it for something that has a required density, right? Like if we're rezoning it for something that is what they consider a high density, and 60% of that property has wetland, and 20% of that property has some heritage trees, some old growth forest, then we need to know that, because then it doesn't make sense to rezone that from ag or rural ag to high density. It should preclude that type of rezoning. So, all along looking at that development plan and where all of the information needs to be presented to the people who represent you, who represent the people, it makes only sense to me that part of the tree ordinance, part of the tree protections that we do goes directly to at what point we look at what's on a piece of property before it's decided what's going to go there. If it's a redevelopment plan, that's fine. I love infill, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something valuable there in our ecosystems. And a lot of times, even in infill plans, there is a wetland impact from a wetland that may have been part of the original mitigation. There may be mature growth that wasn't there when it was platted back in 1950s. And yes, we are dealing with plats from the 50s. So those things are really easy to ascertain now, not in their not in the most complex way. So you can't look on a satellite and say, oh, that's a class 1, or oh, I see an eagle's nest. But what you can do is you can sort of do a desktop and understand that this looks like old growth and that this looks like, and we need to get a complete evaluation before we ever get to the first step of that development review process.
Yeah, a thorough evaluation. But when you commoditize land and nature, then it's just looked at as, I don't know, an asset monetarily, not an asset, in terms of just, we need nature because we're a part of it. And that's how it is,
Is we have to, I think we combat that by making it all a commodity, right? So if the land itself is the commodity, and the argument has always been that the property rights of a property owner, really supersede the inherent rights of nature, which I think is a ludicrous argument, but we'll just play this out for a second. If you're going to make that argument, then why can't we go ahead and make the argument that we need to quantify, much like we did the value of the land? Why don't we go ahead and quantify what's on it, right? So if we know what the overall cost of the carbon offset, if we know what the overall flood protection, if we can, all those things are quantifiable now. We have an ability to do that. And so if we're going to try to do that that balancing act of property rights and what the highest and best use is for a piece of property, then we need to be able to say, okay, that's fine, but is the value of what's already on that land higher? And if it is, then we're not doing this right. And that's where we are right now, is that we have only quantified the value of our trees, of our forests, in what they would cost to replace. And that is ludicrous, knowing what our benefits, the benefits we get from trees. And so, of course, if you look across this county or really any urban and suburban area, the areas that really need more trees because there's more asthma or more health concerns are areas of concern across the board. They're areas where there are socioeconomic struggles and that there have been historical and cultural struggles. And so, once again, let's pile it on, right? We've already got kind of a diminished healthcare system over here. They're not going to say anything if we take out the last forest. They're not going to say anything because they're trying to figure out how to, get to work in the morning with one bus stop in a 15-mile stretch. And so I think we have to look at it in equity. And I think that you can do that in so many ways. But the biggest one, when we look and think about forests and trees, is what the value of those are and what that does for our health, our safety, the property value, where they are. And so all of those things are being considered, and it's very complex. It's a complex issue. And what we had on the books just scratched the surface and had way too many holes. And it had way too many abilities to just, pay a quick fine, pay a quick fee. It's cheap and easy, take it on down. So trying to figure out how to close those loopholes is going to be the challenge that we're going to face over the next few months. And I would love the engagement of anybody out there that has interests or expertise in this. This is going to take some really out of the box or different thinking, because they've never evaluated trees for those full ecological benefits. And we know what they are now. We understand it so much better now than we ever have.
Yeah, no, that's great. So just so everybody knows, we're talking about two different things that are both coming up on November 20th. But there'll be many more opportunities to engage in stakeholder meetings for both. So we're talking about a fertilizer ordinance and a tree ordinance. And I started talking about the fertilizer ordinance, but then Commissioner had really great points to bring up about the tree ordinance.
I know I convoluted those, and they are different.
No. I'm really glad, because they're both coming on the same day. So I'm really glad you did that, because they're both so important, and we need everybody to show up on November 20th. Now, the fertilizer ordinance is coming up. We got some drafts, which you can email fertilizer@ocfl.net if you want a copy of that draft. It has a lot of issues, so they're doing stakeholder meetings to kind of get input from an array of citizens who might have some comments to weigh in on these meetings. But November 20th is when it's going to come, the first draft. So I think this is going to come back in a couple different work sessions.
And I want to clarify, because I do think that the tree ordinance has got more, it's a heavier lift, because we're trying to codify something that hasn't been probably properly codified anywhere, at least not that I can find, that's appropriate as an overlay or as a use here in Orange County, because we have such distinct different areas that we'd like to protect. The fertilizer ordinance is different in that we are surrounded by other jurisdictions that already are using this standard, a standard that seems very reasonable, understanding our groundwater issues and our lake systems. So, if you want to know how to try to control some of those nutrients that are getting into our waterways, look to the areas where they have springs and what they're doing to try to protect those springs. And that's all we're asking to do here, is to get on the same page as the counties that have the spring systems. You would think that we were, trying to, I don't know what, but it's a very reasonable request, and there are definitely there's some resistance to it. And I think it's really interesting because it's not a fertilizer ban. It's really a ban on specific ingredients in a fertilizer. So, and I think it's really important to distinguish those things, because I understand that there are lawn services that rely on a monthly fee schedule for going out. And I spoke with a business owner who does a monthly service for, residential and commercial, and during the summer does applications without the ingredients. It's called a summer application. and they do it without the ingredients of concern. And so, there's just a different application. They're still able to do what they need to do to get through those times without polluting, without adding any additional nutrients to the water. So it's doable. We've seen it done. And I think it's just going to take getting enough pressure from citizens and people who understand the water quality issues to overcome the resistance from some folks that just don't want to change it because they don't want to change it.
Yeah, I had a really interesting experience going to the first stakeholder meeting and hearing some of the talking points that I can now just, my ears perk up because I can hear where there's misleading information trying to be like counter spewed on top of the argument of even having like more restrictive blackout periods or having those different regulations put on the fertilizers. Right off the bat, the larger companies that were really worried about their bottom lines, which they openly admitted to, they were very concerned. They brought up septic tanks as a way to say that that's where the focus needs to be. Mm-hmm. And in my head, which we had someone from EPD say it perfectly. If a house is on fire in two different sections of the house, you don't just say we need to put out this fire. Exactly. That was so perfect.
It's perfectly stated. That's perfectly stated.
Yeah. And there's a lot, individuals, every single one of you, when you go to Home Depot or to a local hardware store and you buy those big 50-pound bags of fertilizers, that's usually, if you're not reading line by line the instructions, there's a lot of room for error in terms of how much your grass actually needs and how much you might be applying. And I think that, that was another thing that a lot of the company leadership were vocalizing was that, we're basically scrutinized on our practices, but the individuals are allowed to go and buy fertilizer anytime because there's no markings on the shelves, XYZ. Both are also wrong, because, there's not necessarily, in terms of scrutiny, they are audited by the state, but there's room for error there too. We are all responsible for the algae blooms. We're all responsible. I don't fertilize my lawn, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I'm, being a conscious person and monitoring my water consumption and XYZ.
Well, and I was going to say you are though, because you compost, right? And I apologize. There's some doggy noise behind me, and I apologize for that. If you're listening.
No apologies needed for doggy noises.
The weather gets them a little rattled, so I'm sorry for that. But the reality of it is that you are doing fertilization. You're just doing the kind that it doesn't come from a container where you are looking for the warnings, and it's compost, and you kind of understand the organic material that you're using. But I think the part that is so important for people to understand about the fertilizer ordinance that we're trying to update now is that, yes, you're right. If you go to the store, you probably can get whatever you want to put on your yard. We are prohibited by state law from pulling those off the shelves. Now we can educate those stores and we can put like a little flyer out. We can educate our residents, and we actually do, right? Sometimes people get their water bills and inside it says, in the summertime, you don't water and don't put on, because the reality of it is, if you don't need to know chemistry to get this. It makes so much sense that the fertilizer that does the damage to the waterways is because you're putting it on your yard. It's raining and going straight out the waterways. It's not doing you any good. It's going straight out there. And so that's why the summertime is the time that we really look at this. And I think that, so, you don't have to worry about the chemistry. You don't have to worry about the, do I, just don't do it. Don't fertilize during rainy season. Don't fertilize during rainy season. Try to find, I think the easiest way really to avoid this whole thing as a homeowner is to try to get rid of your sod. And I know the sod people are out there like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's saying that. But there's lots of other things that are really beautiful in your yard that you can use to, attract pollinators, and that still, we have some amazing options right now for Florida friendly, Florida native, low water consuming, and erosion protecting plantings. So
yeah, some of the things that were brought up at the first stakeholder meeting were that, oh, sunshine mimosa, which is an awesome native, is too prickly on your feet, or Florida friendly landscaping attracts rodents. You for that, but don't try to blame the birds that poop too much in our waterways, or that our native plants are attracting rodents when the rodents are here, whether you have native plants or not.
Yeah,
It
I
was
don't know
just,
what,
it was a
and I,
learning curve for me
I
to
think
like bite my tongue.
yeah, and I think it's, I think there's, like I said, I think change is hard, right? So I think that if, even if the change seems as obvious as this seems, it's always going to be, there's always going to be some resistance. But I think this particular update to our fertilizer ordinance is something that for people in this county, they have to understand, because they love their waterways. Everyone I know has either, a paddleboard or a kayak, or goes down the Wekiva or goes out the Butler Chain, and they've seen a difference. They've seen a difference over the years. So yes, I understand what the pushback is about septic, but we're doing something about that right now. We literally have, and we talked about it in this past Board of County Commissioners. We are pulling septic tanks out in Pine Hills and up in the Wekiva study area and Wekiva Basin. It's a really expensive project. So the other thing I brought up this past Board of County Commission meeting was, can we also, so let's say the house is on fire in 3 different places, right? So let's go ahead and try to do the septic to sewer conversions. Right now, the state is very motivated to assist with some of those, and the county is, got kind of a good system trying to gather those funds and get with residents. On that end, there's work being done. Fertilizer ordinance over here, trying to make sure that we're doing the best practices like they're doing up in areas where they have already made sure that they're not getting those nutrients in those critical times. We can do that on this one. That's an easy change. And then on this side, in the development process, if we have development plans coming forward that are being planned for on a septic, and it's a developer who has the ability to pay, or do something different to either upgrade that system or contribute to a, one of the systems, the septic systems that are higher performing, or ultimately everyone needs to be on sewer because that house is on fire. So if we can do the fertilizer here, if we can do the septic out, just septic to sewer here, and let's quit putting septic in here, then I feel like it's it probably still a little too late. I feel like we shouldn't have let it get this far. And so, I like that right now with the engagement that EPD is going through with stakeholders, they're hearing out the stakeholders that are resistant to this change. I also like that I'm hearing from stakeholders, and this is, commercial stakeholders that have a way to do it, that are already also applying in Lake County and in Seminole counties. They've already had to make this switch. So, we'll get there. It's just going to probably be a little bit of a push and pull, and having you all, our residents that have always been supportive of protecting our water and our air, it makes a difference. That's being heard. So keep up those messages any chance that you get to engage with, your own HOA or your own lawn care company. There's 2 things that you can really just ask them point blank to change. One of them is to make sure that they're not blowing anything down into the gutters that go out into our waterways. And I was so proud my neighborhood put the little the metals on top of the gutters saying, this goes out to our waterways. It had a volunteer group go around. We went down around the Sand Lake area, but just that educational component, because a lot of times the commercial entities that come out and do the lawns in subdivisions, they don't know that. So if you see them out there and you stop and say, hey, you can't, don't blow them down in there, that goes straight out to our waterway, and those, there's fertilizer in there that could be damaging. And, it doesn't have to be an attack. It just can be an educational moment. It happened in my neighborhood. I pulled over my car and I said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but that goes straight out the lake over there, and it's illegal to do that. And the guy was like, really? Sorry. Like, literally apologize, and, started moving it over the other way. So, and that's a really basic, neighbor help a neighbor type thing. And the other one is to be engaged as these updates come through the government here. So that's that fertilizer ordinance. It's going to be, obviously the tree protection ordinance. And so we need you plugged in for those things to really get them across the finish line.
Yeah. So just some events that are coming up as we're wrapping up. So happy Halloween this weekend. Yay! So excited. Do you have any plans, Commissioner?
Oh, are you kidding me? Trick or treating? Well, I'm going to be here for trick or treating. I love Halloween, and my house is really scary. So I love that, like, I'm a little bit known on my street as the Halloween lady. So I've got, sounds and lights, and yeah, I can't wait to hand out candy and see kids.
That's awesome. So just so everybody knows, yesterday and on the 20th, we did two community meetings virtually. One was on the Flemings Road and Avalon Road traffic study. And that is on Facebook that you can go back and watch. We already got a bunch of people asking follow-up questions from that. So go ahead and email district1@ocfl.net if you have any specific questions on that traffic study. And then Oasis Cove residents asked us to do an overview of some of the developments coming in and some of the traffic updates that are coming in around the Reams Road area. So that meeting is uploaded on YouTube and Facebook. You can check it out at NicoleWilson.org as well. Did you want to say anything about those two events?
No, I was going to say, yeah, if there's any questions about anything, just let us know. I know that there's a lot of great information out there, and where to find it is sometimes the key, and we can dig and hunt and try to put those pieces together. I know that we'll probably be coming to you soon also with more information about our concerns with the turnpike and some of the other projects that are coming down that are not under the county's purview, but that we can get engaged.
Awesome. And then of course we have redistricting, which
yes,
October 25th was just the one that happened at the West Orange Recreational Center. Please play around with the map, go to Orange County redistricting's website page and stay engaged with that process.
And I will say something after spending some time with some Gotha folks today. You don't have, if the map part of the redistricting is overwhelming, and I know it is because I struggle with that software. So I am on pins and needles every week seeing the maps that are coming forward. So don't feel obligated to come up with your own map. But what you can do is look at the maps that have been put into place, or you can even just comment about where you are and what you think is an important thing to your community. The way that they evaluate this is they obviously don't want to divide communities of interest, historic, cultural communities. They really want to make sure that they're not diluting a voting bloc. Excuse me. And that seems really obvious in some places, but it doesn't seem as obvious in others. So if you have concerns about your community and redistricting might do, then please go onto the redistricting website, watch the meetings, check out the maps. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out and we can kind of talk through it, because I've had some really great conversations with residents who understood, even what this district looked like 10, 15, 20 years ago and how it's changed. And so it's given me some even better perspective on how these communities have engaged through this process.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that. November 13th, we're doing a 2-hour supply drive on Saturday, November 13th for Matthews Hope. Their shelves are bare. They need all the donations and support that they can possibly get, because they are on the front lines of our most vulnerable population here throughout the community, not just limited to District 1, but the team there is doing incredible work, and they need socks, underwear of all different sizes, brand new sneakers, sheets and long sleeves, shirts, bug repellent. So if you want to get involved or volunteer or help hang flyers or knock on doors to help get some support for it, our partners at Matthews Hope, go ahead and email district1@ocfl.net.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, Matthews Hope has always relied on the community. They are not a government entity. They don't take block grant. They don't So what they do is they really rely on that engagement from the community, and it has always been able to fill the needs that they were confronted with. And they are just now getting to the tipping point where that's not happening anymore. And it's not because people aren't generous, it's because we have really a crisis right now of homelessness and of people who aren't able to access the support systems that they need in the highest time of need. And I try really hard to tell people to try to imagine in your lifetime that this could be you, that we are all, none of us are immune from the possibility of needing to be held up and supported by our community at some point in our life. And I pray for, you know, if that ever happens to me, that there is a Matthews Hope nearby, and that there is, you know, the kind of people that we have out here in West Orange County that support Matthews Hope still involved and still engaged. So it feels like we come a lot and talk about this and ask about this, and it's just because the need continues to grow. And so we are constantly looking for, you know, involvement in volunteerism and in donations, but specific things that they really, really need. And so, you know, if there's a question about something that you're wanting to donate, give them a call. You know, they're there. They're super accessible. Everyone knows everybody, so you can always reach out. And then if you get a chance, check out, they have some really great carpenters that went through their program that do beautiful pieces of furniture and other home decor items. And they use that money to go back into their program. And it's called Matthews Hope Chest, right off of 50 in Dillard. And you talk about, you know, it's the kind of craftsmanship you don't see anymore, you know, that's really beautiful. And so it's a good cause, but it's also something that can really beautify your home and tells a great story about your community. So I encourage you to check that out too.
Any closing thoughts before we wrap up today's virtual office hours?
Happy Halloween! Happy Halloween!
Awesome. Have a happy Halloween, everyone. Please be safe. Check your kids' candy, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Actually, here's what you need to do. Don't worry about the candy thing, whatever. Be careful on the road. Be careful on the road. I'm always very worried because our little ghosts and goblins sometimes wear colors like camo colors. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't see you. Get on a sidewalk. So be very, very careful if you're out in a car during those hours of trick or treat. And if you're sending your little ghosts and goblins out, make sure they have a blinking light or a flashlight or something reflective on them. Okay, stay safe.
Stay safe and happy Halloween. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.